latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. How about this? John Kerry, why the long face? In an interview with the BBC, had this to say about border security.
We have a system, and the president, I wish President Biden had been heard more often saying, I'm going to enforce the law.
If Donald Trump were out on the veranda there, looking out over the sea, and he turned around and came in this room and said, there you are, I was right all along. That's what he would say.
Well, he was right. The problem is we all should have been right.
We all should have been right, yeah, including you, John Kerry, if I remember, during your tenure as the eco-supremacy czar, whatever your title was, where you were flacking for the open borders policy, saying it wasn't a problem of not enforcing the law, as you just said. It was a problem, it was a global problem of, migratory patterns of people fleeing those areas in the developing world most negatively impacted by climate change. And so it's a global problem that requires a global solution and blah, blah, blah. In other words, running interference for the Biden administration not enforcing the law, for, in fact, suborning the entrance of hundreds of thousands of known criminals, maybe not known to the administration because they didn't even bother to attempt vetting, but known to the countries from where they hailed. Huh. How about John Kerry? However, John Kerry, it's a convenient perch from which to say those words now. It also has very little audience in his party. To wit, here was Karen Bass. She's the mayor of L.A., don't you know? Recently asked about sanctuary city policies and if she's going to get even more aggressive in opposition to ICE enforcement actions in L.A., like some of her fellow neo-Marxist sanctuary city and state politicos. Here was this exchange. Take a listen.
Given your strong opposition to federal immigration enforcement actions in Los Angeles, how would you address similar escalations of violence against law enforcement in Texas? And what steps would you propose to prevent such unrest from spreading to Los Angeles while balancing community safety in your sanctuary city policies?
Well, let me just say that the quote-unquote riots that were reported never happened.
I'm sorry, those riots didn't happen? Oh. That's a good one. That's a good way to do it. Rather than characterizing them as mostly peaceful protests, you just say, what riots? There's no riots. The photographic evidence, the missives from your own police department notwithstanding, no riots. And, of course, there's no violence that's being directed against ICE agents either, even though they were attacked by Antifa in San Francisco, and there's video of it over the weekend, even though a New York man was arrested and charged for federally threatening to murder an ICE agent and his children. 43-year-old from Jamestown, New York, posted on X about a specific ICE agent. I can't wait to put a bullet in his brain, but first his children. And this is against the backdrop of what that reporter just mentioned that we talked about earlier in the week, that conspiracy in Alvarado, Texas, among a dozen Antifa types to target ICE agents with violence. Huh. And here in Chicago, we have BLM Brandon ratcheting up the rhetoric in the direction of ICE, offering this declarative statement. The permanency of the position is what's interesting to me, because that may be BLM Brandon's permanent position, but he is not going to be in his permanent position for more than a couple years, I suspect.
You know, again, it's unconscionable at a time in which so many working people and poor people need government to show up for them, that this administration, the Trump administration, has caused so much consternation and division. Look, we are a welcoming city ordinance. Our local police department will not ever cooperate with ICE. Whatever.
Never say will not ever. Chris Clem is a former HHS advisor and retired chief patrol agent. Chris, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. And wow, we got our hands full with some of these idiots that have microphones. And by that, I'm talking about former Secretary Kerry and Karen Bass and your Mayor Brandon over there.
That's, you think?
All that's rich coming from those people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and again, the suggestion also is you just discount things that are uncomfortable that it occurred, like the rioting that occurred in the direction of ICE in L.A., and then you suggest that any sort of coordinated and instigated targeting of ICE agents are one-offs or misdirection plays because, of course, the real violence is coming from this administration. So you know these rhetorical plays. But the bottom line is that Tom Homan is living up to the promise, which is, it seems to me, you tell me, you talk to the guys on the line, but where they are just continuing to keep their head down and focus on the job at hand. With him saying earlier in this week that, you think 3,000 arrests a day is a big number. We need to get to 7,000 just to get back to pre-Biden.
Yeah, I've known Tom for a long time. I've probably spoke about it on the show. This administration, starting with the president and through his leadership with Holman and Noem and Attorney General Bondi and the whole cabinet, they are focusing these resources to meet the goals of immigration enforcement. I mean, that's the only way we bring integrity back to this system that has been the immigration system that has been just screwed up for decades. And when you have people like, John Kerry now acknowledging that, the system, yeah. And you mentioned it. He was part of the system. For years, I was arresting people, and not once did they say climate change is the reason why we traveled around the country. No, it was because we were pulled in here because we were getting handouts and people were going to give us opportunities to work, although we're going to have to work off our debt. But it was complete and utter nonsense to hear them say that climate change, well, yeah, okay, some warming issues or some floods in Central America led to a bad crop year, so people came to get work. But this is just, it's nonsensical. And I'm just kind of going through the intros, like Karen Bass saying the riots didn't happen. Well, if the BLM riots from a couple years ago were all considered peaceful protests, they're changing the narrative on what is a protest and what is a riot and what is an assault. And then you've got a mayor of Chicago saying they will never cooperate with ICE. Let's remind everybody, ICE is going after criminals. ICE is going after people that are posing threats. And yeah, you know what? There's going to be some collateral damage because if you're an illegal alien hanging out with an illegal alien criminal gang member, this administration has not asked or will not ask federal law enforcement to turn a blind eye and ignore crimes happening in their presence. And that's the big difference. That's why some people that wouldn't be on the target list would be arrested, but they're out there going after these criminals. And it's just why the progressives in the Democratic Party cannot understand or refuse, and it's basically out lying to talk about illegal aliens, not immigrants, illegal aliens. We don't want to target immigrants. We're targeting illegal aliens. And I think your listeners understand that, but please have them phone a friend that doesn't get that. There's a difference between alien, illegal alien, or migrant and illegal migrant. We're focusing on the criminal aspect here. It's unbelievable that they still think they can get away with that.
New development, and this is particularly interested in your take on this, is because you were an advisor at HHS. HHS, Health and Human Services, and other agencies, including Ag and the Labor Department, said they had issued notice to all relevant program partners under new guidance that anyone in the country illegally is barred from Head Start and other programs and grants, including homelessness assistance, Title IX family planning, substance abuse treatment, and mental health services. And, I think you have to, remove the magnets, and that is the welfare state programs. And I've often said, you want to jump to the front of the line or potentially get in queue and move up in queue faster. Why don't we offer the opportunity for people wanting to come to this country for a better life and are honest about it? They're not falsely claiming political or religious persecution. They just want a better life, and that's understandable. And they want to contribute, and they want to be independent and successful. Just sign a waiver saying, I will never accept any or access any welfare state transfer payments, and that gets you expedited maybe in the queue. And this seems to be in that vein.
Yeah, when you look at what is happening and the directions and some of the executive orders on, the President's America First agenda. That's what he's doing. He's basically saying all U.S. taxpayer money that should go to U.S. citizens and qualified non-citizens.
Right.
And nobody likes. It's an uncomfortable talk. Nobody wants to say, we want to go kick this, 6-year-old or 5-year-old out of Head Start. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's not for unqualified non-citizens, for U.S. citizens and low income and those that need help, and that's again where I think all of us want to be. But we've got to have a leveling of the playing field and a reset in this situation, and so yeah, it requires difficult decisions and tough actions when we're looking at this. But you're talking billions of dollars when you open up that worm, that can of Pandora's box, when you start peeling back layers of like what Health and Human Services provides for the American people, and how federal dollars go to states who manage it, and then they pay for illegal aliens through state money, and they reimburse it through the federal money because they're playing the shell game. We are paying for it in places like Colorado and California and other states. But you mentioned something else about trying to help people that just want a better life, that aren't. There is this whole public charge section of the Immigration and Nationality Act. When people come in the right way, we can look at this. If you're coming over here seeking a visa or some requirement, and I won't pretend to know all the details on this. It's been a little while since I studied that section. But if you are going to be, in other words, a ward of the state, we can deny you entry.
Yeah, right.
And all that comes in when you do it the right way. But when they've been falsely claiming asylum, when they've been doing everything illegally, they're actually jumping in the line and not following the rules. And it's going to take years before they get to the point of, having to prove that they're not going to be a ward of the state. And again, that's why that system needs to be revamped. It's why we need to find some common sense. And what you brought up is a common sense solution, because we're going to have to dig ourselves out of the immigration side of this once we get the criminality taken care of that's already here, because we've secured the border. The border is as secure as it's ever been. Will we ever secure it 100%? As long as there's threats against the United States, the border and the border environment is dynamic and fluid. So we're running the best that I have ever heard of and seen and witnessed in all my years associated, which was 30 on today's Friday. Wednesday was my 30th anniversary when I joined the Border Patrol. So in 30 years, it's the most secure I've ever seen it. And so, yeah, now it's time to get some common sense practices in place to clean up the immigration, so we don't have this conversation 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now.
Well, the good news for people in this country illegally maybe losing like Head Start access is Head Start doesn't work anyway, even for American citizens, so you're not really missing out on much. But with respect to sensible policies, there's a push in certain quarters within the Republican ranks now that the border has been secured, as you're saying, and now that Tom Homan and ICE is working through capturing and deporting people in this country illegally who pose public safety threats and working through that list. There's now this push to say, okay, well, now we need to talk about basically temporary worker programs for farmers or for, for the ag sector or for the hospitality sector. What's your perspective on that? Do you think that now is the time for that conversation, or we have a ways to go before we can get to that conversation about guest worker programs?
If Democrats and Republicans could actually have a sensible conversation, which is, again, probably never going to happen. You could do things concurrently, right? You could turn around and say, we're securing the border, we're doing the enforcement. Let's have a conversation on how we fix the immigration side. But what I have seen and what I've experienced in my lifetime, and especially in my professional lifetime, is it always becomes a give and take, right? And people will say, well, that's negotiation. Well, we shouldn't negotiate 5 miles of border wall and 5,000 enforcement agents to up a quota for this or that. We need to separate that. We need to really focus on keeping security, whether it's at the border or inside the country from immigration perspective, and then common sense solutions. I believe that you would have an overwhelming majority of Americans that would expect that our leadership, elected leadership that is, could come up with a solution, and it would be almost an expectation for some of these, agricultural workers, some of these, they're very skillful, but the unskilled classifications for like your yard maintenance, your housekeeping, things like that. I think that's what the American people would be comfortable with. But those that are here illegally, and I think that's kind of the plan. If you want to self-deport using the CBP Home app,
right,
you can go back in line, and if that's what you want to do, I think if we can find a way. But again, if you're caught here illegally, you shouldn't automatically get a free pass to jump in front of the line. We've got to kind of restart. It's going to be complicated.
Yeah, well,
that's why they kick it down the can and just add to it versus taking away. But
right.
I think that's where we need to go. I think that's where the president would like to go. I've not heard that, but just reading the tea leaves, he wants to find a solution. He had an opportunity, but Schumer and Pelosi didn't want to give him the win back when he was on his first term, and it just got worse. So yeah, I think we have to separate the conversation from security and enforcement to immigration. Otherwise, there's just going to be too many give and takes, and we'll trade off wall and enforcement for amnesties, and that's not what we want. But common sense for the right things that helps America. That's a critical and actually just an absolutely necessary conversation.
Chris Clem is a former HHS advisor and retired Chief Patrol Agent, as you just said, 30 years. Chris Clem, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks for having me on. Y'all have a great day and a safe weekend.
You too. And Chris joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
They took everything. Our equipment, our supplies. It's all gone.
It's devastating.